So I think we'll get started. If I missed you, we'll make you say your name and what you're working on when you ask a question. And so I'll switch it over to Neil. Do you want to introduce our speakers?
Yes, I do. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And thanks for joining us here this morning. Let me the next slide. So we have two great guest speakers. I'm really excited about this. We have Emma Kohlenbrander from the Global Distributors Collective, which is a collective of last mile distributors. And they provide support to their members through events, training facilities, and they're also an advocate for the sector. And so they have great insight into their member organizations. We'll hear from Emma. And then we also have Leslie Marincola, who is the CEO of Angaza, which is a technology platform that empowers distributors to sell and track their products. So the format of the webinar will be, first we'll hand it over to Emma, who will have some slides introducing the GDC and then highlighting some key trends that they see in the sector. And then we'll hand it over to Leslie, who also has some slides to go over what Angaza is doing and some of the key trends and solutions to distribution issues. And so this will take maybe 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes, we'll see. And then we're gonna open it up to questions. So this is really about them providing context into the key trends in distribution and allowing you to engage and ask questions. So you can either ask questions by unmuting yourself or using the chat function. And Marie or I will be reviewing the chat function. So during the presentations, if anything comes up, just go ahead and write your question or comment. So with no further ado, let me call out Emma and hand over the slides to her. So Emma, if you can, I'm going to stop sharing and you can share your screen.
Thanks, Neil. Let me just figure out how to share my screen. Okay. All right, is that working?
Yes, it is. Great.
Brilliant. Okay, well, hi everyone, and big thanks to Neil and Marie and the rest of the Miller Centre team for giving us the chance to come and talk to you all. So I'll just start by telling you a little bit about the Global Distributors Collective. We are a collective of distributors around the world, and our mission is to support last mile distributors to make life-changing products affordable and available to all. So we work across sectors. We're not exclusive to energy. Our members sell a whole range of products from a whole range of sectors, but they are all fundamentally household products that contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have two main strategic goals. So one is about providing services directly to our members that help them to improve their business performance and grow by helping them save time, reduce costs, build capacity, and develop new partnerships. So we're hosting a series of learning and collaboration events to bring distributors together to network and share knowledge. We are designing a training facility for last mile distributors. We've recently launched an innovation challenge to support distributors to pilot innovations that can solve last mile distribution challenges. And we're currently working to develop the very first state of the sector report for last mile distribution as well, to put some data around the sector and help other stakeholders to better understand what they can do to support last mile distribution companies. And then secondly, we are working to build a collective voice for the sector by generating and sharing learning, raising the profile of the space, and helping the broader ecosystem to work with distributors. Fundamentally, we're trying to raise the profile of you guys and try and put a spotlight on distribution and the essential role that distribution plays in bringing life-changing products to the people who need them. We formally launched in November last year, and currently our membership comprises about 140 last mile distribution companies. So some of you are on the call today, which is fantastic. To kind of paint the picture of the broader ecosystem, there are a whole range of different channels that are reaching last mile consumers with life-changing products. And those channels are pretty diverse. So you've got kind of giveaway programs by national governments, NGOs, and corporates who are distributing free products or heavily subsidized products. You've got consumers accessing products through corporate outlets like Total, who sells a whole range of solar lanterns at its gas stations, primarily in West Africa. You have your sales agents and retail outlets that are dedicated solely to selling life-changing products. A lot of these are set up specifically by last mile distribution companies. Financial institutions will distribute life-changing products either as part of a sort of bundled loan or as dedicated financial products. You have formal retail outlets and e-commerce platforms, informal retail outlets, which can be local sort of mum and pop shops, or can be sort of trades shops, electrical shops, hardware shops. And then you've got informal entrepreneurs who will often buy less than 100 products and take them to last mile communities and sell them to their own communities or neighboring communities. So GDC members are working across all of these distribution channels, but what they all have in common is that they all adopt a market-based approach. So they sell products rather than giving them away for free. They sell to last mile consumers. They're deliberately targeting the bottom of the pyramid, whether that's in urban or rural settings. They often provide additional services to support and protect consumers. So they're not just selling products, they're also providing consumer financing, they're providing after-sales service, they're facilitating consumer education and behavior change, they're selling quality certified products most of the time. And they leverage a variety of distribution channels. So some of them will sell through sales agent networks, some of them through retail outlets, some of them through e-commerce platforms, or a combination of any of the channels that I mentioned on the previous slide. So I've just noted there that at the GDC, we focus on distributors who are relatively small. So they have a less than $5 million dollars a year turnover. And the reason is because these are the players who are making up the majority of the market, but they are receiving the least support. So to paint a bit of a picture of our membership, cumulatively, these 140 members have sold more than 8 million life-changing products. Members have a presence in 43 countries. Representation is highest in East Africa, particularly in Kenya and Uganda. They're mostly young companies. So as you can see here, 23% started in the last 2 years and 53% in the last 5 years. They're small companies, so only 6% of our members have an annual turnover of more than $2 million US dollars. And as I mentioned earlier, they use mixed distribution models, but primarily through sales agent networks and through retail outlets, which can be either proprietary retail outlets or leveraging existing retail outlets. And they have very common challenges, which is the whole reason why we started the GDC, because we recognized that distributors faced very similar barriers and we're reinventing the wheel to overcome those barriers. And the top 3 challenges that we see over and over again is access to finance, capacity, and logistics. So I wanted to talk about 3 trends that we're seeing in the sector. And after having conversations with hundreds of last mile distributors and others in the space. And I think the first trend that's quite interesting is that distributors are increasingly diversifying their product portfolios. And this sort of flies in the face of the traditional thinking about last mile distribution, which is that distributors need to specialize in one product in order to effectively scale and to be efficient. But we're not seeing that play out in practice. So you can see here the data with our membership that 72% of our members are selling more than one type of product and 39% sell 4 or more types of products. The most common products do tend to be clean energy products, which tends to be a nice sort of entry technology into a last mile community because it has such a clear value proposition. So it's a relatively easy sell. But water products and agricultural products also feature quite highly. And as you can see there, distributors are selling products across a range of other sectors, including hygiene and sanitation, nutrition, and health. So there are a number of reasons for this trend. So the first is that the quality of technologies is improving, which means that there are more appropriate products that are available and affordable for end consumers. Secondly, you've got third-party providers like Angaza who are making inventory management and consumer financing much easier for distributors to manage, so they can focus their attention on selling a broader portfolio of products than they might be able to otherwise. And higher asset products as well, which they wouldn't be able to sell without consumer financing. Thirdly, distributors are better able to sell online and using mobile money thanks to increased mobile phone penetration and 3G coverage and mobile money usage. Fourth, distributors do have a really good understanding of their consumers, good relationships with their consumers. And as the sector becomes more established and distributors become more entrenched, they are better able to respond to those needs. And finally, distributors see that it's important for them to reduce their risk and have a diversified set of revenue streams in competitive and or unstable markets. So in saying all that, it's still not easy for distributors to diversify their product portfolios and to maintain that diversity. It's very hard for them to access up-to-date product information and get the data that they need about products in order to make informed choices about what products to sell. It's hard to manage multiple supplier relationships, and it takes time and money to retrain your sales force every time you start selling a new product, both in terms of the technical aspects of training in new product categories, but also in terms of sales strategies. So the second trend that we're seeing is that the sector is beginning to organize and consolidate. Unlike other sectors where there is a strong fear of competition, we really do see a lot of willingness to collaborate between last mile distribution companies. And I think that's really because distributors tend to operate very localized models in sort of niche territories, and they're not competing against a large number of other companies. And they've spent so long developing these sort of very tailored models that it's going to take a lot for a competitor to come in and undercut them. So as a result of that sort of willingness to collaborate, we are seeing distributors entering into quite exciting strategic partnerships, both with individual distributors and also with groups of distributors, to create efficiencies, to enter new markets, and to reduce risk. So some examples, we're seeing distributors club together to share containers of stock so that they can procure products they wouldn't be able to procure otherwise. Sharing transport and logistics to get those products to last mile areas for distributors who are selling in different product categories. And they're sharing after sales service as well, including sharing resources like sales technicians. We're seeing mergers between distributors, two examples being Pollinate Energy and Empower Generation in India and Nepal, who merged last year, and Vitalite Zambia and Vitalite Senegal, who merged the year before, to leverage economies of scale and take advantage of the best parts of each other's business. We're seeing acquisitions of distributors by larger players, an example being Global Cycle Solutions in Tanzania, who was acquired by Greenlight Planet a couple of years ago. Distributors are co-applying for funding so that they can access larger pots of funding that they'd be able to access by themselves. And finally, we're starting to see the emergence of collectives and cooperatives. So the GDC being an obvious example. Another example is Sendia Uganda, which is a collective of 8 last mile distribution companies who are working to procure together and collectively train their sales force. And we're also seeing the increasing influence of national renewable energy associations who are doing a lot of advocacy on a national level. But again, in saying all of that, distributors are still very vulnerable. We are seeing a really high churn rate in the sector with distributors coming and going and shutting down business. And cooperation is still restricted because ultimately distributors are still operating very much in isolation and they're not aware of other distributors in the space. And they're not getting the opportunities to come together and network. There are no dedicated forums for distribution right now, which is very much something that we're hoping to change. And the final trend I wanted to talk about is that we are seeing support for distributors growing, at least at the firm level, which is exciting. And I think there is a recognition that distributors really are the key players who are reaching the last mile. And if we really want to leave no one behind, we can't ignore distribution companies. The mainstream approach to date by donors and investors in the international development community has been to pick winners. So pick a small number of firms and invest a ton of time and money and energy in helping them scale, and thereby minimizing risk. And the result of that has meant that distributors, who are mostly small and local, are excluded from financing schemes. And the example that I've given here is that in the last 5 years, just 10 companies attracted 87% of investment into the off-grid solar space, which is pretty incredible. But we are seeing this firm level support grow. So again, we've got the emergence of specialized third-party providers like Angaza and Solaris off-grid. Pioneering investors are coming into the space with dedicated financing mechanisms just for distributors. So an example is SEMA Funds, who's providing inventory financing for distributors. Some of you will be familiar with D-Prize, who also provide early stage grant funding for distributors. Donors are designing more appropriate financing mechanisms. And an example of that is the results-based financing scheme that uses a last mile index, which is currently being developed by USAID and NDEV. And finally, suppliers are getting more savvy. So suppliers are starting to cater better to the needs of their distribution partners, for example, by providing better training and marketing material, by running sales promotions, by setting up local country partners so that they can better cater to the needs of their distributors in country. But again, there are still challenges here. Distributors face a lot of difficulty with raising finance, and they continue to lack negotiating power with suppliers. And that means that they struggle with unpredictable supply and low margins. So none of these kind of problems have really been cracked, but I think it's exciting to see progress in each of these trend areas.
So we need to follow up with them
that's
again.
It from me, and here's the website.
I don't think it can go burnt.
And my contact details if anyone wants to get in touch.
I can ask you to do that, but I'm sure there's only a
Emma, this is Peter. Thanks for that. I did have one question. Can you clarify what you mean by firm level support?
Yeah, so by that I just mean support that's being targeted to individual companies as opposed to support that's being provided across the sector as a whole.
Okay.
That's very much kind of the approach that we're taking at the GDC, is instead of trying to invest in individual distribution companies and hoping that they're going to solve the access problem, instead we're trying to support the broader sector and hope that by supporting distributors to kind of make incremental changes to their business and increase their efficiency and their effectiveness, that we can improve the sustainability and the scale of a much larger number of companies and not just one or two.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, so back to you, Neil.
Great, excellent. I realized I was on mute this whole time.
I thought so.
Thanks, Emma. That was great. And let's turn over to Leslie, if you can share your slides.
Yes, 1 second.
Great. And then again, everyone, after Leslie's slides, we can all ask questions.
But also feel free to type them into the chat if you want in between, in case you might forget.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Looks good.
Yes. Great.
Awesome. Good morning or evening, everyone, wherever in the world you may be. My name's Leslie. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Angaza. Emma did a great job setting up the ecosystem that we're working to enable with technology. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to dig into some of the needs that we're seeing from a lot of the distribution partners that we work with, and kind of highlight some of the technology solutions that we've created to address those needs. But before I dive too deep, I just want to introduce you to Angaza if you're not familiar. We're a technology company serving last mile distribution businesses across emerging markets, across the globe. And our mission is to create the technology that allows these businesses to offer life-changing products to anyone, anywhere. Emma touched upon this as well, but we see life-changing products as any product that might help a client actually increase their income, save money, or actually just increase their quality of life. So this is anything from a solar lighting product to a motorbike to a clean cook stove, even laptops now. So our software platform, you can see a snapshot of that in the corner of this slide, enables distributors to really fully digitize their business, really get to know their clients by doing so, and ultimately help manage the complex realities of running a last mile product distribution businesses, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So this actually touches upon technology that helps distributors, anything from managing a dispersed sales agent workforce to actually communicating wirelessly with products that they've sold to their clients with metering and monitoring technology. So it's really a full array of technology, trying to help distributors at their headquarters, help them manage their sales agents, and help them stay in touch with their client base. I want to give you a little bit of a sense of the types of customers that we work with here. And again, this will sound familiar to a lot of what Emma was setting up about the whole ecosystem here. Angaza today, we work with over 150 last mile distributors. And this is truly across the globe. We work in over 50 countries with these partners. It might be no surprise to you that about 80% of these last mile distributors operate in Africa, and East Africa specifically has a very high number of these distributors. What's interesting is that we see about 10,000 platform users across these 150 last mile distributors. So this is anything from the management team of a distributor using our platform all the way to their sales agent team, which each are equipped with a mobile app called the Activator that they're actually using on the go to register new client information and collect payments. So across our entire technology platform, we have over 10,000 users, from managers to sales agents using this technology. I'm proud to say that we've helped last mile distributors sell over 1 million products. About 60% of these 1 million products have been large solar home systems. So when I say large, this is typically over 6-watt solar home systems, and the 6 to 15-watt lighting and charging systems tend to be the most popular type of product. But again, our platform supports all kinds of life-changing products. And what's interesting is basically a key part of our platform is helping these distributors offer pay-as-you-go financing. So essentially, they can sell a product for a very low down payment and then collect continued payments over time as the client uses the product. And from those continued payments, we're seeing about 95% of the payments be made via mobile money. So I think this is really interesting because if you looked at this stat 5 years ago, it would probably be the reverse. 95% of payments were being collected via cash. But now, because a lot of mobile money systems exist across these countries and a lot of distributors are using technology to manage their pay-as-you-go businesses, I think the trend is really reversed, and most of these payments are being made by the clients in mobile money and deposited directly to the bank account of these distributors. So that hopefully helps you just get a sense of, again, the varied ecosystem that Angaza works across. And keep this in mind as I talk about some of the three trends that we're seeing. Because, you know, like Emma painted as well, I think the entire sector and the entire industry has matured, especially over the last couple of years. And we're seeing a lot of these businesses start to offer a varied product portfolio, again, start to think about their relationship with their clients, not just as a one-off product sale, but really there might be a pay-as-you-go relationship directly from the beginning. And it's not just about that first product that the client might need, but really, you know, after the client buys a solar home system, maybe they need a loan for a cook stove or a motorbike. And then the last mile distributor has built that relationship with the client to be able to offer those multiple products. So I'm going to jump in here. Because Angaza is a technology company, I want to highlight 3 recent customer needs that we've been really commonly hearing, and then specifically talk to you about the technology solutions that we've built to address them. One of Angaza's company values is innovate with empathy. And this really relates to a lot of the work that we do with our distribution partners to help truly understand their needs and actually know that the solution that we're designing to meet those needs is actually going to be used and helpful. So we use something called a human-centered design process, where essentially, you know, we're out there in the field with last mile distributors trying to understand the challenges that they're facing. We're talking to their clients, we're talking to their agents, we're even putting prototypes, whether that be sort of a pen and paper drawing in front of the agents, or, you know, we mock up something quick through PowerPoint or something to help them actually interact with a piece of software or with a new screen on the mobile app, and make sure that we're actually not only designing something that's useful for the distribution business, but something that is easily understood and used by the client base and by those rural sales agents. So I'm going to go into each of the 3 of these. So the key insight number 1 here is that we're hearing a growing trend from last mile distributors that they're wanting to also sell non-metered products risk-free. So let me take a step back here. Basically, the majority of the partners that we work with sell metered pay-as-you-go products. And what that means is these products have Angaza's embedded metering and monitoring technology inside of the product, such that the product will simply turn on or off based on whether that client has paid for time on that product or not. So a client will essentially prepay for a week of light, and the product will turn on for that week. But once that time runs out, the product deactivates automatically until the client pays again. So that sort of situation, the scenario I described, is a metered product. But that technology can only be embedded in a product if it's an electronic product that actually has a circuit board and a battery inside of the product. But many last mile distributors are selling what we call non-metered products. This could be a ceramic clean cook stove that doesn't actually have an electronic component. And they still want to offer consumer financing for these types of products because they tend to still be too expensive for a typical off-grid family. So we continue to hear this need about, how do we actually also sell non-metered products risk-free? And we looked at a lot of these distribution businesses and noticed that because they were selling a variety of products, it was often a variety of metered products and a variety of non-metered products. And essentially, we developed a technology solution that would allow these distributors to do what we call re-meter a metered product such that it can actually be the technical enforcement for a non-metered product. So what I mean by that is once a client has actually fully paid off their device, a metered product like a solar home system will actually unlock for good, and it no longer has that metering as a part of it. But actually the distributor, if that client wants a subsequent loan for a non-metered product, that distributor can re-meter that original metered solar home system, turn it into that lock-unlock state again, such that it can enforce the loan for the clean cook stove. So we're seeing the take-up of this feature very heavily actually now, especially with distributors that are selling a variety of these products. And it's really helping them, again, control the risk that they have in being a consumer financing business. So the second trend here that I'll highlight, no surprise here probably, but a lot of last mile distributors who are offering consumer financing and basically taking the risk of paying for that asset up front while a client pays for it over time, they need to really better predict potential client defaults. So they need to know, out of their entire client base, which of their clients have low risk, meaning the client understands how to use the technology, they have enough buying power to make payments, and they're likely going to stay on a pretty sure payment plan through Unlock, through paying off that product. But there are clients that are much higher risk, and a distributor needs to really know who those clients are and how to actually deal with them. Especially if you think about a big part of the cost of last mile distribution is client follow-up. And you don't really want to go send a sales agent out to a client if they don't need it, if they're not in that sort of high risk category. So one thing that Angaza has done is actually aggregated a lot of the data that we see across payment trends, across client demographic information, and we build a series of predictive data science models that ultimately help these distributors actually understand the risk of these clients and take action accordingly and really focus their time and their resources on the clients that need specific types of follow-up. And then lastly, the third trend I'll highlight here is an overarching distributor need to provide better after-sales client support. Again, like I mentioned in the beginning, these distributors are starting to think about that long-term client relationship, and their reputation is a big piece of that. So they need to build that trust from the client over time. So one of the things that we've done to address this need is actually help enable manufacturers with a GSM technology, which, again, this is for metered products, typically solar lighting systems. You can actually turn that product into a cell phone, in a sense, and you can transmit data bidirectionally between that product and Angaza software. So this is the ability to wirelessly transmit both diagnostic and usage information from these types of products that are already sold to the client and living in the client's home. So you can see here just an example of a snapshot of how this GSM technology actually helps last mile distributors. That unit health that you see in the snapshot, this is showing what I mean by the ability for these last mile distributors to actually monitor battery performance remotely. They can monitor solar charging behavior of that product remotely. And ultimately what this enables a distributor to do is when a client calls in and says, hey, my product's not working, can you help me? The distributor is able to very likely help them over the phone. It might be just that they position the solar panel incorrectly and just need to move it into full sunlight, rather than sending an expensive sales agent out to actually help that distributor. So I'll stop there for now. Please get in touch. This is my email. And you can also visit our website. We're trying to actually put out a lot of blog posts and even case studies from all of our partners in the last mile distribution space, such that we can help distributors learn from each other.
Thanks, Leslie. That was great. I encourage everyone to go to her website, to Angaza's website, and also go to the Global Distributors Collective website. And if you're not a member, sign up. So we have about 20 minutes left, which is great. So we can take this, take some questions and have questions for Leslie and Emma. So if you have a question, you can chat, you can type it in the chat group, or we can unmute you. So either way. And I have one question from Local Links already. And so his question, this is for you, Leslie. He says, can another company, or do you want to, Local Links, do you want to ask the question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, just following up on her presentation. about remetering. So if I'm a microfinance company and I'm given a client a loan, can I go back to Angaza and say I want to remit the solar home system, even if the person has already paid, and have it now on my system so that I can manage the loan? That's the question.
So Leslie, I think he's asking if can they remeter a home system if he wasn't the original supplier?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, always a challenge to find the mute button. So if you're not the original supplier, if I'm understanding your question correctly, the answer would be no, because you wouldn't really know in the first place that that product was sold to the client, because that was not your client relationship. So what we're really focused on is enabling a distributor who's already sold a metered product to a client. That client has paid off. We're enabling them to sort of reuse that initial sale to enforce the loan for a subsequent sale, but all within the same distributor. That being said, we're actually seeing a number of partnerships happen between microfinance institutions and last mile distributors to essentially collaborate and both share their client base and share their resources and client follow-up opportunities. So I would say to directly address your question, a partnership there would be probably the best route to go.
Great. Okay, others.
This is Peter. I have a question, maybe primarily for Leslie, but I think Emma might have insight into it too. Leslie, I was curious about, with the data that you've been gathering so far, are there any interesting trends you've noticed around defaults on pay-as-you-go? You alluded to credit risk and so on, but I'm curious if there are trends that are emerging, you know, kind of maybe geographical trends or seasonal trends or other things that are starting to emerge as insights you're getting given the large quantity of data that you're now starting to gather on who's paying and who's not.
Yes, short answer is absolutely. Long answer is let's connect after this call and I can share a lot more, but I'll share a couple interesting insights right now. So essentially we do see client default rates that really vary across last mile distributors. And if I had to pinpoint, you know, a single factor that led to this difference across distributors, it is the amount of time and energy that they're investing in the training of their sales agents, because sales agents are essentially the lifeblood of these distribution businesses often. And I say sales agents, this could be a retail outlet as well. But essentially this sales agent is the person educating the end client on how to actually interact with a metered pay-as-you-go device. So they're training not only about how to use the device, but how to make payments and how to just, again, use the pay-as-you-go technology. So that's sort of the single factor that we see that influences client default rate. We see a lot of variance across some countries, definitely across products. The product loan terms that are chosen for a product make a big difference here. So we're working with distributors pretty closely to help them actually understand, you know, when they think about setting a down payment or a total loan term, how should they think about that in terms of their repayment, but also just in terms of their entire portfolio risk. Because the longer the loan term actually, the higher risk is that the client will not actually finish that loan term. So anyway, those are just some insights, but happy to connect offline and share some more.
Thanks, Leslie. Others? Please ask your questions.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. One is sort of related to the business model of last mile distributors, and that is what margins are they typically getting when they sell products? And I'm imagining it's probably different by product category. And then the other question relates to sort of incentives for sales agents. Are there certain types of commission structure or incentives that are proving to be most effective with sales agents in the field?
I'll say, Emma, would you like to take that one? Margins and then incentives for sales agents.
Yeah, sure. So both of these are good questions and big questions about which we don't really have much data right now. But as part of the State of the Sector report, we are doing interviews with about 100 members, and these are two of the very big questions that we're going to be asking. So we'll have a lot more data to share in the next couple of months. I think the margins do differ quite strongly depending on the product. I mean, for a solar lantern, for example, the margins tend to be sort of around 20 to 25%, but that's for a solar lantern, and with sort of higher value solar products like solar home systems, that margin tends to increase. But then obviously that sort of has its own, those kind of products present their own challenges and are less affordable for last mile consumers. And as Leslie mentioned, those products need to be offered on a longer loan term, which also then increases the default risk. With regards to incentives, generally distributors will use a blend of base and commission, and we see that the distributors who have most effectively reached scale, and the more established distributors tend to adopt that blended model. A lot of distributors do also use kind of a pure commission-based model, but they really struggle with sort of retaining their sales agents, because their sales agents don't have the same level of security that agents do who have some level of base salary. But nearly all distributors that we speak to are offering incentives beyond just a base and commission structure. They often offer sort of health insurance, and transport allowance being sort of the two big ones. And then often things like loans for their children's education. So there are sort of quite a few creative incentives that distributors can offer to try and sort of provide a level of sort of security or an incentive that they aren't able to provide through a high base salary.
Great question, Jeff. All right, others. I want to hear some of the companies on the call ask some questions. Okay, we got a general question from Kandwani. Is there a possibility of linking LMD across the globe so they could be able to share the products or help others access markets? So I think that's another one for you, Emma, and what GDC is doing.
Well, yeah, that's kind of like the whole point of the GDC. I mean, so we're kind of trying to find a balance between providing very specific services that will tangibly improve the business performance of distributors. And to do that, that means we have to have a regional focus, and we can't work with all of our members to offer services, like, for example, support with procurement or face-to-face training. We can't offer that to all 140 members at once. It's just not possible. So we're trying to balance provision of those types of services with providing services that can add value to members globally, and that is around things like knowledge exchange and peer-to-peer learning. So, for example, we're soon to be releasing a last mile distribution podcast series in collaboration with Finding Impact, where we're featuring 3 different distributors talking about 3 big business pivots that they've made, whether that's pivoting from a door-to-door sales agent model to a retail model, or whether that's transitioning from a cash-based model to a pay-go model. And I think that's providing some very kind of interesting and useful insights for other distributors. And we're hoping to do a lot more of that type of sort of knowledge exchange. So if you have any kind of specific ideas about particular sort of insights or topics that you'd like to share or have more information about, we can certainly do more to sort of set up, webinars and platforms between distributors to facilitate that kind of knowledge exchange.
Look forward to the podcasts.
Yeah. It looks like we have another question kind of follow up on that from Charlotte. Do you find that distribution becomes easier for LMDs when they partner?
Well, what do you mean by easier?
Charlotte, do you want to respond? You can go off mute.
Hi, Emma. So my question is, would distribution become, meaning are they able to accelerate the adoption of the products they're selling when they partner?
I mean, yeah, I think so, and that's definitely the point of them entering into new sort of strategic partnerships. I mean, with the partnerships that they're entering into with other distributors, they're trying to cut down their costs by sharing resources and sharing services. And I mentioned a couple of examples of that earlier. And then obviously, distributors are partnering with a whole range of other stakeholders. I mean, Leslie talked about sort of partnerships with MFIs that can, alleviate some of the burden that distributors face with consumer financing. They're partnering with NGOs, and NGOs are supporting them by doing, sort of consumer awareness and behavior change campaigns that generate leads and increase demand for products, making it easier for distributors to sell. So I think there's a whole kind of range of possible partnerships for distributors that I think is definitely making their lives easier by kind of taking some of the functions that they're currently required to do off of their plates. But it obviously very much depends on the partner and on the nature of the partnership. But it's very much where the sector is moving.
Okay, thank you, Emma.
Hi, Emma, Gideon here from Empower Energy. First of all, I love Finding Impact, and I'm really excited to hear you partnering with them. But I have a question essentially around success metrics. What do you think should be the key success metrics that all last mile distribution models should be measured against, if any? And do you have any data allowing for the comparison of, the success of different distribution models? For example, comparing agents versus, fixed retail locations, etc. And I'm particularly thinking around, I feel like what we should be aiming for as a sector is really reaching 100% of last mile customers by, let's say, 2030. And I feel like we're still quite far away from that. So in that context, do you have any data on that?
Great question. So I think this is something that's really important for the sector, is to develop some kind of standardized KPIs for distributors. And that's both, to allow distributors, as you say, to kind of benchmark themselves against other companies and track their own performance. But it's also for the broader sector to get a sense of the impact that distributors are having and how efficiently they're able to have that impact. What is their kind of impact per dollar invested? So we don't have a set of those metrics right now that we would recommend that distributors use. I think it's a little bit early to be setting those kind of metrics, and particularly because there is so much diversity in business models of last mile distribution companies. I think that's going to be quite tricky to do. It is something that the off-grid GOGLA, the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, has recently developed. So they've developed a set of standardized KPIs for the off-grid sector. And they're working with their membership right now to sort of test those metrics and collect data against those metrics and support off-grid companies to track and report against those metrics. And I think they've got a lot of learnings and insights to share, and it's obviously quite difficult to enforce reporting against these metrics, and there's often not the right incentives for companies to do that reporting. So I think we can learn a lot from what they're doing and build on what they're doing, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but it's not something that's going to happen overnight. I think it's something we're going to look to do in the future, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'll build on that question actually a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 So I think it's interesting too, because it's not just about measuring success against other last mile distributors, but it's being able to clearly talk about success to external funders such that we can get more capital into the sector. In the beginning of Emma's presentation, she talked about how much capital has been raised by so few companies, yet there are so many last mile distributors out there that need this type of capital. So one thing we're focused on is how do we actually, again, standardize the types of metrics that last mile distributors are talking about, such that investors, whether that be DFIs all the way to more commercial capital to donors, really understand the type of risk of their capital, and they can price that capital appropriately.
Great. Do we have?
Here. This is Rick Stammers from GDC in Madagascar. I want to thank panel so much for sharing these insights. I think it's extremely useful. As GDC, we're really focusing on the base of the pyramid, like the people on less than $1 and $2 a day. What we found is that it's still quite difficult for this group to find themselves accessible sort of products, because pay-as-you-go oftentimes still to be too costly for this group. I was just wondering, like Leslie, you said most of your customers are still in East Africa. Do you see that slowly this is expanding across Africa, or like is it still very much concentrated in East Africa?
Yeah, so we do work in over 50 countries. So we literally have last mile distribution partners in all corners of the globe. I think you said you're in Madagascar. And we actually do work with a number of partners in Madagascar as well. And I think the reason that you're seeing more and more last mile distributors pop up in Madagascar and other parts of sub-Saharan Africa is really access to capital and access to technology, including mobile money. I talked a little bit about how the percentage of payments that we're seeing come in via mobile money. Definitely East Africa has such a high number of last mile distributors because it's a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, because nothing is easy about last mile distribution, but it's a little bit easier to actually collect ongoing payments from your customers, so you can make your products affordable and not break the bank when you're actually thinking about collecting on those long-term loans. So I think a lot of the trends that happen in East Africa are starting to happen in other countries, enabled by certain factors like mobile money.
Great. Any last questions? We're coming to the end of the webinar, folks. Okay. Well, this was great. So, a big thanks to Emma and Leslie. For a final plug, watch out for Emma's in the GDC's podcasts, regional events. Their innovation challenge, which is still live, I believe. That's an East African-based innovation challenge. And then also Angaza's blog posts and improvements and new innovations on its technology platform. So thanks to both of you for joining us, and this has been great.